Thanks again, everyone, for joining us on this Friday. Today's session is Designing AI-Powered EdTech Responsibly, What Districts Need and How They're Finding It. We have a really fantastic panel with us today that I have the pleasure of speaking with. My name is Parker Van Nostrand. I'm the project director for product certifications at Digital Promise. And if you're not as familiar with Digital Promise, we're a global nonprofit organization working at the intersection of research, practice, and technology for improved outcomes for all learners. I can imagine many of you joined us today because you're feeling some kind of mixture of excitement and skepticism and uncertainty and intrigue about EdTech and its application in learning. I mean, who isn't feeling all of those things, right? But I think there are often some really important voices missing in the big conversations that are happening about AI and its implementation in EdTech. Um, so this discussion is an attempt to amplify some of those important voices that are not always brought to the table. So in April, Digital Promise launched our newest product certification, Responsibly Designed AI, which shines a light on EdTech products that take seriously the safety, transparency, and user agency needed to power EdTech with AI. And then in turn, this certification makes it easier for those procuring EdTech to find solutions that are designing AI most responsibly. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. All of our panelists played a crucial role in the development and testing of this certification before launch. So if you could each state your name and role, and maybe just in one sentence, what part you've played in the development of this certification as it's come to light. So we can go in the order here. So Andrew, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. Appreciate you inviting me to join the conversation today. I'm excited to be part of it as well. So I serve as the instructional technology coordinator for Iowa City Community School District in Iowa City, Iowa. So I saw a lot of other Midwest folks in here. In my role, I like to joke that I'm a jack of all trades, a master of none, but really just kind of looking to operationalize best practices with emerging technologies. In my role, kind of with the certification process, I had the privilege of being able to kind of evaluate two different submissions or applicants and provide feedback on the process. So it was a great experience to learn just the intentionality that goes into ensuring responsibly designed AI platforms and tools.
Awesome, thank you. Kip?
Hello, everyone. Kip Glazer, Principal, Mountain View High School in Mountain View, California, home of Google. And I live in the Silicon Valley. And so I have had lots of interactions with different tech people who are our family and our families and Digital Promise folks who are actually in Redwood City. I've spoken to many researchers and folks at Digital Promise about the need for this type of certification. And I was very excited to be invited to the original conversation that simultaneously and independently that Digital Promise was working on. And I was also able to review some products. So I'm excited to be here.
Great, thank you. Miriam?
Hi, I'm Miriam, CEO of Check It Learning. I am based in San Francisco Bay Area. I worked in the education field for the past 15 years, and I work in this capacity of CEO for Check It Learning for the past 2 years. And we were part of the first cohort to be awarded the certification.
Great, we're very excited for you to be here as well. And Lauren?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Rodriguez. I'm the manager of enterprise generative AI for Chicago Public Schools. I oversee the implementation of generative AI across the district and the building of a responsible, sustainable, and adaptable foundational infrastructure that's focused on AI governance and literacy. Regarding the certification, I was a part of the development of the specific parameters and also evaluated two products as well during the pilot evaluation process.
Thanks so much. I think it's so important that we have these different perspectives and different roles within the EdTech and EdTech procurement ecosystem. So it's a really crucial to have these perspectives in this kind of conversation. So I'll kick off our conversation with a question for Kip. So, Kip, as a principal, what excites you about how AI can impact educators and learners in your school? And how do you see it solving real challenges that you have?
Thank you for that question. And I wish I knew the perfect answer. So hopefully we can workshop this. I think that's what's exciting about having a conversation around AI, because every day that I feel like I'm learning new things and how I can grow as not only the school leader, but also an educator myself. Because I think we're all in this together and we're learning as things come out and get implemented. So for me, there's like three buckets of AI use that I see at our school. One is about the productivity improvement. And also then the second thing is about the student and teacher engagement in terms of how they're interacting with the content. And then the third part of like unknowns, right? Because sometimes when you're talking about using AI to improve, say, social media engagement with the parent education component, but also that touches some other parts of our school operations. So I've been also very fortunate to have a group of students who I recruited for my tech internship program. And I feel like I'm learning a lot from that in terms of developing chatbots themselves, because we have some very strong computer science students, and also the user interface end of it. So it's a lot of things happening all at the same time, and I hope that I can continue to be part of this conversation so that I can be a model, if you will, because we are all in this together.
Yeah, we definitely are, and it sounds like there's a lot going on where you are, and a lot of considerations that you need to take into account. And so, kind of on that note, and this is a question for Andrew and Lauren. At the district level, what are you cautionary about when it comes to evaluating AI-powered products? And let's start with Lauren here.
So in addition to the items that are specifically called out in the certification, bias, data considerations, for me, we're having a lot of conversations around the efficacy of these products. I think, when you talk about the quantity of not even just AI edtech products, just edtech products in general, and how they're all accessible during, in the district, we have a certain price point where schools can go up to and purchase edtech products. And so it's kind of like they can do whatever they want. With AI edtech products, we're trying to build a pilot intake process. So from the governance side of things, we have subcommittees that can intake AI products and build out pilots in the district so that we can actually have desired outcomes for those AI edtech products and whether or not those products are meeting those desired outcomes. So we can actually make decisions around the use of these AI edtech tools in the district instead of it kind of just becoming the wild west of AI ed tech products, because they're constantly appearing. There's hundreds of them out there right now, most of which probably won't be around in the next 3 to 5 years. And so, from our standpoint, we really want to make sure that there's that efficacy component, and also how the products are actually preparing the users, whether there's teachers or students, for the continuous evolution of this technology, and not necessarily making them dependent on the current state, or even if we're talking about the evolution of user interfaces with this type of technology, getting them stuck on like the chatbot interface, because we're already talking about voice interface and visual interface, agentic era, right? And so that's in 2.5 years after ChatGPT came out, and that's already been the evolution of UI. And so if our teachers and our students are getting used to just getting focused on like a chat interface, they're not really being prepared for the continuous evolution of this technology and the products, and that's going to happen faster than we all could be comfortable with evolving with. So really want to make sure that those products take that in mind as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many considerations here. And Andrew, in what sense, how does that square with what you're doing that Lauren said, and maybe what are some differences in your own district?
Yeah, I would echo the conversation that Lauren was pointing out. Just the fact that like the plethora of AI tools that it is next to impossible and bandwidth wise to be able to address and evaluate all those. But the one thing that you can see here represented on the slide, we have tried to be intentional, similar to what Lauren has expressed there, of having a process in place to systematically evaluate those tools and resources that are being requested. And so I'll start at the teacher level and then kind of zoom into the student level. But this just shows kind of the hodgepodge of the workflow that we currently have. Really, we try to center instruction first and foremost in the evaluation of these AI tools and resources. So we kind of have a process employed at the district where teachers that would like to request any software, whether it's AI powered or not, is really rooted in instruction first and foremost. And so they are able to submit this request. That request has a list of questions that they have to go through to answer. Those questions then are categorized and calculated and captured into a Google document, which is shared with one of our coordinators across the district. That coordinator looks at it through their lens of instruction and their content expertise to evaluate the validity of that tool to amplify the instructional design process and the instructional outcomes that we're after. After that goes through that kind of initial phase, it is either approved or denied. If it is approved, then it moves on to our tech department to then further analyze it for data privacy concerns, as well as cybersecurity concerns. If it does pass both of those, then it does become one of those approved resources that are on the list. If we go to the next slide, I'll kind of highlight the next piece of this. The questions that you're going to see capture these different categories. So really, when we're having a teacher or end user submit a software request, they're really outlining how does this tool or product really align with our curricular goals and objectives? What are the support mechanisms I'm going to need? Is that an instructional technology coach? Is it a coach that's in the classroom with them, helping them on this? So just what are the intentional supports they're going to need? Does it align with the learning outcomes that we're trying to target? The instructional design process. So is it fluid in terms of being adaptable to the different changes in pedagogy, such as blended learning, whether it is differentiation? What are those ways that it can be adaptable? Also, does it help amplify student engagement? Is it credible? So are there other evaluations out there or resources that other institutions that have evaluated it and provided some credible use cases of it? Then also, does it provide some assessment data? So does it give us some of the outputs for us to make some instructional moves? And then also, what does it look like for integration and rostering on our kind of back end side of things? And then lastly, the special ed component there, ensuring that there is some cross-functional teamwork to ensure that it is an accessible tool for all users across our district. So those are just kind of the categories that we look at. And then on that next slide, one of the last slides that kind of captures these pieces here, this is just kind of a rubric that we've deployed in conjunction with those different categories to assist us in understanding, does the tool align with our kind of instructional goals? And if so, then let's go ahead and move this on to the next phase of the evaluation. So that's really the teacher-facing side of things. As far as the student-facing side of things, what we're really looking at intentionally is to try to ensure that there are some guardrails and oversight for that interaction. And as Lauren pointed out, trying to get beyond just the chatbot interface, how do we expose students to a plethora of modalities that they can interface with to see that it's not just a text-based interaction with the AI mechanism, but there's also video, there's also audio, and just trying to make sure that we have those guardrails in place and that we have oversight, not only as a district, but also at the teacher level, so that they can intervene and use those as great teachable moments to educate those students on the AI literacy so that they're successful navigating AI beyond just their K-12 experience.
Awesome, thank you. And was there anything you wanted to share about this, or was that at another?
I'll talk about that as we get further in
Okay.
about some of the labels. Yep.
Sounds good. So we've heard now, like, there are so many different pieces of the puzzle that schools and districts are really interested in when it comes to evaluating ed tech. And we've, heard from three different really important perspectives on that. And I want to turn it over to Miriam, because you're sort of on the other side of the equation here. And I know that you've spoken with, so many educators and district leaders, users of Check It Learning, to understand what their needs are. So if you could share a little bit, you can share a little bit first about, what Check It Learning is, and tell me, and tell us, what you have heard from educators and administrators in your conversations with them, and how that has impacted the development of the AI in Check It Learning.
Sure. So we are offering a human-centered learning management system that has a AI component to it, which is trained in neuroscience. And to answer your question, yes, in our conversations with educators and administrators, we see both excitements and concerns, as you mentioned, in your introduction. That's exactly what we see. So excitement, because there's definitely a desire and a need for tools that go beyond content generation and that genuinely offer personalized support. And concerns about AI being like a black box or replacing teacher agency. And of course, the integrity issue as well as the impact on student skill development. So we also witness a growing interest in human-centered and evidence-based approaches and tools, with a growing number of talks and presentations, like at conferences, but also webinars online around these topics of transparency and security and privacy and safety as well. So it definitely shapes the development of AI at Check-It Learning. Instead of just focusing on AI as a content generator, we building it to act as a neuroscience informed mentor. So that not only use these principles in the background, but really empowers teachers and students with that knowledge. So teacher can see why our AI mentor is suggesting a learning strategy, and students can reflect on how their learning behavior evolve and impact their growth. So understanding how learning happens and how the brain works, and owning the notion of neuroplasticity and growth mindset is truly a game changer. And that is one of the ways we can use AI as a empowering, in an empowering and inclusive way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's so important that whenever we are implementing AI in EdTech, we circle it back around like, how is this empowering the agency and the individuality of a learner? And so, Miriam, when you talked about the neuroplasticity, recognizing that individuality of the user and their potential to grow is really, an important and effective use of AI. So I want to shift to talk a little bit more about the Responsibly Designed AI certification. So Lauren, Andrew, and Kip, you all took part in designing the criteria for and assessing some of the pilot applications for this certification. And I've put up just in very, very, very simple terms what each of the 5 criteria revolve around. Of course, there's more specifications about what we're asking for and what that looks like, but these are kind of the big categories here for the 5 different criteria that we have within this certification. And if you could pick one high-level criterion that really is important in your consideration of AI in your schools, in your classrooms, share a little bit more about why this is important in your consideration of AI in EdTech. And why don't we start with Kip?
So I think all 5 criteria are so important. I just want to say that because I don't want you to think that I'm picking and choosing. But for me at the site, uh, I just felt like number 5, the ability for teacher to be able to really override the algorithm so that that individual interaction with the student was valued. That was really, really important. And one of the product that I reviewed had that. And that's just not, I mean, that's very surface level, but the way that the product was designed was based on learning science, as Miriam talked about. And it was very intentional in how the teacher can go in there and really interact with the result of the product as well as the student feedback. And that was super important to me because I think at the end of the day, we want our student to be seen as individuals and precious people, not just as a data point. But the other things are very important as well, like the data security, because that would be my second choice.
Well, with that transition, either Andrew or Lauren, were you planning on talking about data security? We can hop to you. If not, that's okay. All right. Well, anyway, we can do the transition regardless. Why don't we go to Andrew? Which of these 5 criteria would you like to highlight?
Yeah, I was going to talk about just AI labels. I think, as Lauren mentioned earlier too, that just the multimodal ways in which we can interface with AI, I think that's one of the big things that we want to make sure that we can do within our interactions from the teacher's perspective, but also more importantly, the student perspective too, of what is generated by AI versus not. And so if we go back one slide, this is just going to highlight the example here. One of the things that we're doing internally in Iowa City is we have a curriculum for K-12. So we're developing curriculum where students are going to actually develop their AI literacy. And so this is an activity we're going to do with our second graders where they're going to develop a landscape. They're going to sketch out a landscape, and then we're actually going to take that landscape, upload it to Canva, and actually use Canva AI to show how we can quickly edit some of those features of our landscape drawing. So you can see the original one of a student example on the left. The right-hand side is going to be assisted by AI. So I'm going to use Magic Edit to highlight the sun, for example, and then use a generative AI prompt to help me generate a new sun. The intent behind this is at the end of this, it's going to allow us to really humanize the experience to understand that your identity and your creativeness is now taken away a little bit by using AI. And so does that AI image, edited image that you're using as the output, does that really capture who you are? So we want to be intentional too after that conversation of saying, is this still your art or is it not your art? And have that kind of debate with them and conversation of like, now how do we note how this has been assisted with AI and lead into that conversation of how do we actually label our outputs as we're interfacing with AI to make sure that we're being transparent about our use. And so we want to also see that within those products we're leveraging is that there is a clear way and a transparent way that it identifies this was generated by AI versus this was not generated by AI, because we want those even at the youngest learners to understand that there is a level of responsibility for us as the end user to have ourselves in that loop the entire journey throughout the use of AI.
Thank you for highlighting that, Andrew. And I think when generative AI first kind of came onto the edtech scene, everyone was like, a student's going to use AI to write their whole essay. And like, of course, we don't want exactly that to happen, but that's a very binary whole essay or no essay thinking. There's so many, it's a gradient. There's so many things between that, everything, almost all the uses of Gen AI are actually going to be between that spectrum of not using for my essay at all or wrote my whole essay. So we have to think critically about what is that line? How do we make attributions and how do we support our students come to a place where they fully understand the implications of using Gen AI anywhere along that spectrum? And Lauren, could you share one of the criteria that stuck out to you as equally as important as all the others?
Yeah, I was going to say just to show how equal all of these are, mine was bias mitigation, specifically because when we talk about Chicago Public Schools, 89% of our students are from minority groups or multiracial, 25% are English learners, 15% have students with disabilities. And so when our students are going to be using these tools, and let's talk about image generators or video generators as an example, especially when, say, image generators first came out, there was a Bloomberg article specifically about one of them, did a huge analysis of 300 images for different jobs, high-paying jobs, low-paying jobs, criminals. And then when video generators started becoming publicly available, there was kind of a repeat. It wasn't Bloomberg, but I found other people doing repeats with very simple prompts, not talking about specific individuals or humans or anything. And the outputs were not reflective of our student population. And so when our students are using these tools, chances are they're not going to see themselves unless we put a lot of effort and time into the bias mitigation specifically so that they can see themselves when they end up using these tools more broadly.
Yeah, and that ties, really directly to the agency embedded into the AI labels portion and the user override. We need to make sure that they see themselves represented so that they can have agentic learning experiences. So, Miriam, as someone who went through the process of submitting evidence to have Check-It Learning's application earn this certification, you thought, very deeply about what it means to represent these different criteria and the development that went into Check-It Learning, leading, all the way leading up to the point where you did end up applying. So why did you decide to apply for this certification, and what value does it have from your end as a solution developer? And why do you think Check-It Learning was a fit for this certification?
Well, I have to say, Parker, that it was like a natural fit for us. We didn't have to work for the certification. I would say, like, from day one, we have made it a priority. Responsible design and development was already like really big for us. making sure that whatever we bring to life is safe, age appropriate, and has a real educational impact was, always like a priority in our like product team and research team as well. We work with a large team of neuroscientists and school psychologists, in addition to edtech specialists and a wide range of educators from different backgrounds, admins and students at all levels, like research, design, development, implementation, piloting even. So, our goal is really to offer a product that is not only based on science of learning, but also to evaluate if and when AI should be used, and also like to which audience. And when we come to the conclusion that using AI is, makes sense, is the right fit, then we work with our ethical and anti-bias committee to make sure that we do it in a way that's inclusive and meaningful. So, as I say, the certification was, we were in alignment already with the certification criteria. And also, I would say that it's more than just like wanting to do the right thing at product level or even at company level. We consider ourselves like a big advocates in the edtech world and in the education world. We feel that it's our responsibility to actually like advocate for safe edtech tools. We collaborate with a nonprofit in the US called Everyone AI, and also we are part of a global coalition for beneficial AI for children that gathers governments, non-NGOs, edtech companies and tech companies to advocate for evidence-based technology, but also to influence policies to make sure that AI is used in a way that's responsible and positively impactful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. And something that stuck out to me in your answer was it sounds like it was a really intentional decision to include AI. It wasn't just like, oh, let's just do this because this is what we can do, but evaluating that it actually was the right fit for what you wanted to do. And that's something that is really important for all edtech developers who are thinking about incorporating AI to really consider is like, is this actually something that is going to further your goals to impact student learning, or are you just doing it because there is something shiny and novel about it? So as our final question here, before we hop into an audience Q&A portion, I'd like to hear from our district and school leaders how they envision that edtech decision makers, so those who are evaluating and purchasing edtech for schools and for districts, how can they incorporate certifications or third-party evidence like Digital Promises, Responsibly Designed AI certification into their edtech evaluation and procurement processes? And on top of that, how do you plan to, or how do you already do that? And let's kick it off with Lauren.
So for us, we had a law in Illinois called the Student Online Personal Protection Act, which requires the districts to have data sharing agreements in place with all edtech products, whether or not they're actually being used. It's a no-cost agreement. It's basically just setting up the relationship between the district and the product. That's by law, and that came into place before all of the AI stuff started coming out. And so we actually are taking advantage of the fact that we have that funnel and that intake process and are adding AI components, evaluation components to that vetting process and that approval process. And so for certifications like this, we can't necessarily require certifications in the process, but we can point to them and say, for the evaluators, if these certifications are represented, then we can streamline the process because the considerations that we would be looking at anyway can be confirmed by this certification. And so really ensuring that we're going to be integrating it into the vetting process that's already in place. And also the pilot intake process that I spoke to earlier regarding the actual establishment of a pilot that we will run with different schools and whoever the end user would be in that case. So trying to make it as seamless as possible, integrating into our pre-existing systems and not trying to stand up all new systems and processes. That's a really important thing that we're doing here. And I saw the guidebook dropped in the chat, and the reason why we did that as well is because instead of like a policy, is because this technology is ever evolving, and so we wanted to be able to evolve our guidebook along with the technology and the feedback from our users. And so we actually do quarterly updates on our guidebook specifically for that fact. We knew if we tried to create an AI policy, by the time the policy got approved by the board and pushed out, it would be outdated. And so we were very flexible, and we want to have that adaptive, responsible approach. But we, in that policy, in the guidebook, we point to pre-existing systems again, so that we're not trying to like throw more stuff on top of our stakeholders that they have to learn about and adapt to.
I appreciate you sharing that. I think that, nimbleness and agility is a really important part of the process here. Andrew, could you share a little bit about how you envision certifications or third-party evidence being leveraged?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the first steps there when we talked about this question and that procurement process, I think first and foremost is to, like, baby steps, have a procurement process in place. I mean, the example you saw of our workflow is new. Like, this is the end of year one of us deploying that workflow. It has had a lot of hiccups along the way. We've made different iterations of it. We've gone from different visualizations. So now we have another visualization of it that shows our in review list of resources, our approved list of resources, and those that have been denied. And so again, what's captured on that list is items that are not just AI specific, but curriculum in general, to get teachers to start having some intentionality behind the ways in which we're using the different tools and what kind of data is actually accessed from those third parties. So one of the big things that we also do is make sure that we do get a student data privacy agreement with those third party vendors to make sure that we're kind of ensuring data governance internally. The other piece too, when we think about what next steps might we take internally as well, now that we have these additional certifications such as the Responsibly Designed certification, that's something else that we can start to weave into our review process. Currently, right now, one of the things that we lean into is One Edtech is another entry point for us to review from the privacy standpoint to ensure that we have some checks and balances. When I talk about bandwidth, we're a small team in Iowa City. We don't have a ton of bandwidth. I'm guessing a lot of districts encounter the same thing of how do we actually address that bandwidth shortage that we have. And so we lean into One Edtech, and I think the Responsibly Designed certification is another layer that helps kind of maximize the limited bandwidth that you have to kind of like work smarter, not harder throughout the entire process. So first and foremost, start with the procurement process, and then make sure that you kind of lean into some of those other organizations and resources out there for certifications to help simplify that process on your end.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. And actually, to transition to Kip, I'm going to do also transition to the Q&A. We had a question for Kip about, you're at the school level and not the district level. So procurement and EdTech evaluation might look a little bit differently for you. So what advice would you give to school leaders who are looking to introduce AI and evaluate AI that might be used in their classrooms when your own implementation might look a little bit different because you're not at the district level?
Thank you for that. I echo what Andrew and Lauren's been saying, that there are so many things are changing so fast at the site, and also not having enough bandwidth. So the certification really helps. I think it's like a first line of defense, if you will, when there are products that are flooding the market, but at least there are people who have learning science background as well as AI ethics background who have looked at it. And the way that we participate in the certification process was it's as a collective, right? It's not just Andrew sitting in his office checking things off, as opposed to we're leveraging the collective wisdom of a lot of people who have expertise in different areas. So I think that gives us assurance as a school leader. When I see the certification, then that's the first line. And then another way that I've been able to use is because there are 5 different categories that are very broad, but also very important, that we can drill down and really think about school context specific tools that we're looking for, so that at least the broad stroke of what we should be concerned about in terms of student safety or learning science principles have been already taken care of. Now we can really think about how that will look inside of the classroom with the student. So that's the way that I wanted the certification to work. And I'm so excited to have this actually be a thing now. And
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, just that yours is such an important perspective to have, being closer, being more, being on the school site and actually seeing what that implementation looks like in a day-to-day base room and in a classroom to classroom basis. So we have another question from our Q&A here, and this is for Miriam. So how do you hope to use or talk about your certification status, having earned this certification in conversations with school districts or those who purchase EdTech?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a milestone. It gave us the certification gave us like third-party validation that our LMS meets rigorous standards, not just in terms of functionality, but specifically in responsible use of AI, data practice, and student agency, which are like big topics at the moment. So that has allowed us to move beyond claims in conversations with school leaders and actually point to a verified foundation where it opened door for trust-based relationships. And as my fellow panelists mentioned, it definitely helps district leaders to feel more confident because it has been vouched by a whole team, and that it has specific criteria. That's not just another tool in the market, but I appreciated what I think Lauren mentioned about sustainability. That when you do the right thing, you endorse yourself for a long-term partnership with educators and school district leaders, which because you have educators and student best interest in mind, and that's what drives the development of your product.
Thanks, Miriam. And David had a question in the Q&A, which is, what are the benchmark or on the AI tools based on the criteria rubrics? Is it based on qualitative metrics or quantitative metrics? What pedagogic metrics are used? Is it US focused or globally focused? So I think I can actually take this question since I helped drive the creation of this certification and its co-design and piloting with the panelists here, as well as other folks who participated. And so I think this is a question about what kind of evidence is submitted as part of the application, like what is actually being shown. And that's a great question. And it makes it more real what we're talking about. And it's a mixture of what you asked in your question, David, which is showing some very specific things like certain data use policies, data security policies that as the assessors of the application, we can look and see if you actually have stated these things and if you are compliant and aligned with certain things that we are asking you to state and have that transparency around. It's also showing evidence of your design process, so that bias mitigation criterion. Actually, it might be easiest if I show here. That bias mitigation element is the applicant explaining and also showing evidence of what their design process was, and us actually asking them to show what was the time when in your design process you identified that the AI in your product was actually providing biased results or was providing inequitable results or generated content, and what did you do to rectify that? And actually give us specific examples of that in your design process. And with AI labels and user override, that's giving us screenshots, videos, other documentation about how the solution actually flows and what the user experience is actually like. So it's definitely a combination of lots of different types of evidence. And in the chat, Melissa asked, what are some of the best examples of AI use you've seen in the classroom? I'll leave it open to the panelists, anyone who would like to jump in to answer this question. What are some of the best examples of AI use you've seen in the classroom?
I'll answer. I think when AI gets used as the intermediary that allows the students to become more confident and proficient in the topic that they are learning. So as I said, I have a group of students who I'm working with, and they've brought up that when they're late at night trying to get their homework done and there are no adults around, and then they're able to interact with AI chatbot. Now they know to say, don't make up the answers, please, and it needs to be factual. They know how to put that into their prompt. And then when they get the answer, they come back to the classroom next day and ask the teacher and working with them to ensure that what they understood was the correct information. That's one way. And then what we're doing is they're using a lot of assistive technology in the classroom to ensure that they're able to interact with the content that are esoteric or challenging. So my students told me that they have the AI to read the text or summarize the text, highlight the text, and then they go back to the original text to see whether AI is done the accurate job of assisting them. So I think students are figuring out how to really work with teachers under the supervision of them and using this as a tool as we want it, not the authority or the replacement of the teacher in the classroom.
A couple use cases I've seen is as an example in like ELA using AI to generate maybe a first draft of an essay, and then the student actually evaluates the first draft and so critiques it, and that's actually the assignment for the student is actually to be basically the teacher in that scenario where they're actually evaluating and critiquing the first draft that was generated by the chatbot. I've also seen, not broadly, but kind of experimenting with something like this where a chatbot is actually prompted to be a learner in a scenario, and the student is the teacher specifically in that interaction. And so the student's job is to teach the chatbot about a given topic, and the chatbot asks questions just as the student would ask questions. And so it kind of reinforces that knowledge in the student as they're teaching the chatbot the information about that given topic. And then from the teacher perspective, I think differentiating content is one of the probably best use cases for AI for a teacher. Obviously, all the prompting and everything, all the considerations that have to go into what tools the teacher using, data considerations, how they're prompting it, all of that in mind as well. But it really can support a teacher in taking a base curriculum. Like we have a digital curriculum for CPS called Skyline, which we have full course content for teachers. In theory, they could take a lesson, specific resources, and then use, because we're a Google district, Gemini, to ask Gemini to create differentiated versions of that core resource, which we already know has been vetted as high quality and culturally responsive. And so using something that's already provided to them, vetted, and then just using the AI system to support them in creating various versions for the different needs of their students, I think is a really valuable use case for AI in the classroom. I also wanted to quickly double down on the One Edtech component as well. They're building out an AI data rubric self-assessment, which I'm a co-chair on. And I always bring up the Responsibly Designed AI certification from Digital Promise, because as a district who has all of these nonprofits creating all of these certifications and self-assessments, it could get very confusing, especially if they could potentially conflict with one another. So ensuring that, as these different resources for the districts are being developed, that they're being considerate of what else is out there and not trying to conflict with them or make it too complicated for a district to be able to evaluate given tools. And so bringing in this certification into that conversation is something that I'm always doing as well.
I'd love to hear that, Lauren. Thank you. We are at time, so a big round of thank yous to our panelists, Miriam, Kip, Andrew, and Lauren. And thank you all for joining us and being part of this really important conversation and writing some great questions in the chat as well. We'll send out a recording of this, and so feel free to follow up with any questions in the response to that recording that we'll share with you all.